Well, with just one more week left in 2023, we're going to look ahead to some themes to watch in the new year. TD Cowen shared its top 10 themes for 2024, and we want to zone in on just a few key ones with Robert Fagan, who is the TD Cowen co-head of research. Robert, great to have you here with us this morning. Let's talk about artificial intelligence first and foremost. This was one that rounded out your top 10 list. It dominated conversations and the market in 2023. What should we be looking out for in that sector and theme in the new year?
Yeah, I mean, certainly areas like cloud computing and search are the obvious candidates, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Google, et cetera. But we've also looked at data center capacity, done a ton of work around that, as well as power consumption. Keep in mind that even the old generation of ChatGPT, which was GPT-3, took about 8 times the amount of carbon footprint as the lifetime of a car. So an enormous amount of power consumption. We're also looking at other areas in AI around the periphery, like drug discovery. It takes on average about 10 years and $2.5 billion to bring a new drug to market. So imagine if you could do that more accurately, more quickly, and help a whole lot more people.
We take a look at some of your other themes. Another one that stuck out to us was geopolitical risk. We have certainly seen a rise in tensions around the world, too many to name at this point. In terms of the greatest risk or what investors need to keep in mind for how it could impact their portfolios, what's top of mind for you?
Sure. I mean, certainly the flashpoints are Ukraine, the Middle East, Taiwan, et cetera. So the most obvious impact of the theme is a rise in defense spending. In fact, we think that we could see an over 50% increase in defense spending in Europe over the next few years. I think it's important for investors to keep in mind that this won't be just land and sea and air traditional investments, but we're seeing increasing investments in cybersecurity by the government, space, which is a huge frontier in terms of defense spending, as well as biosecurity.
And then we got to talk about financials. I mean, we come across and come after this year that has been where you think about the banking crisis for some of the regional banks and then the consolidation that took place thereafter. And now more recently, some of the considerations that large banks have had to make and appearances on Capitol Hill around Basel III endgame. Where does this theme perhaps round out your list, and what are some of the key catalysts that investors should be watching for?
Yes, well, we certainly expect heavier liquidity and capital requirements for banks. That seems almost certain. And an area that we're watching carefully is commercial real estate, which is about 25% of bank loans and where a lot of the regionals are more exposed. If you look at CMBS delinquencies, for example, they rose to about 5.85% recently, which is up from 1.6% last year. So not an insignificant increase in terms of CMBS delinquencies. And so commercial real estate, particularly office space, is an area that we're watching carefully.
When you take into account the 2024 election, the outcome, what that could mean more specifically for financials and some of these mega banks, what does that look like in terms of the regulatory landscape and the impact that that could then have on some of these fundamentals, on some of their returns?
So the biggest wild card is of course, President Trump. Trump is traditionally a low regulation, viewed as a low regulation president, but at the same time, you've got all of the potential tariff issues that we ran into during his term as president. And so those are really the two major factors that investors will be balancing. And then the final issue rounding things out is the implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was an extraordinarily impactful piece of legislation passed in 2022 that impacts everything from semiconductor spending, battery factory building, pharmaceutical manufacturing, et cetera. So the next president will really have a significant hand in how all of those dollars will be spent.